What would you do if you saw someone acting aggressively in a crowded subway train? Would you intervene or would you stay back? In May 2023, Daniel Penny, a former Marine, faced this exact dilemma when Jordan Neely, a man with a troubled past, allegedly became threatening on a New York City subway. But what happened next would spark a nationwide debate. Daniel Penny's actions led to the death of Jordan Neely, a tragic event that would not only make headlines, but also bring up questions about justice, public safety, and the use of force in everyday situations. After months of legal battles, the jury recently found Daniel Penny not guilty of criminally negligent homicide. But why? Was it self-defense, or did he go too far? Was justice truly served? In today's video, we're diving deep into the case of Daniel Penny and Jordan Neely. You'll learn who these two men are, what led to that fateful subway incident, and the shocking details of the trial that followed. We'll break down the facts. You might not know the key pieces of evidence, the arguments that turned the tide in court, and how this case is challenging our views on justice and personal safety. Stick with us until the end, because we'll also be exploring the public backlash and the controversial verdict and what it means for the future of similar cases. Welcome to Craze TV. If you're interested in real stories, real drama, and real justice, make sure you hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss what's coming next. Daniel Penny is a former U.S. Marine who came into the public eye after the tragic events on a New York City subway in May 2023. Before the incident, Penny had lived a relatively quiet life, far from the media spotlight. He was originally from Long Island, New York, and had served in the Marine Corps, a branch of the military known for its intense training and discipline. After his service, Penny worked in a variety of roles, including in construction and security. He was known by those around him as an ordinary man, someone who had a strong sense of responsibility and who at the time seemed focused on leading a stable life. Penny had also been active in his community and was reported to have a calm demeanor. However, some who knew him noted that his experiences as a Marine had left him with a heightened sense of awareness in high-pressure situations. This background became a crucial element in understanding the events that followed. Having undergone extensive military training, Penny was accustomed to dealing with stress, and in some ways may have viewed situations differently than someone without that background. His role in the incident, however, would raise questions about his actions and judgment when faced with a perceived threat. Despite being described as a thoughtful individual by friends and acquaintances, Penny's background as a Marine made him more prepared to react quickly in moments of crisis. But what happened when he encountered Jordan Neely on that subway train would change everything. It would challenge how people viewed his past experiences, his training, and his judgment. Penny's actions that day and the trial that followed would force him into a spotlight he had never sought. Jordan Neely was a 30-year-old man with a life marked by deep struggles and hardship. Born and raised in New York City, Neely had a difficult upbringing that shaped much of his adult life. He was known to be an aspiring performer, often seen imitating Michael Jackson on the subway, entertaining commuters with his dance moves and energetic performances. This was a side of Neely that many saw, a man with a flair for life, seeking to bring joy to those around him despite his personal challenges. However, beneath the surface, Jordan Neely's life was filled with pain and hardship. He struggled with severe mental health issues, including bipolar disorder, and had faced homelessness for years. He often found himself in and out of shelters, navigating the difficulties of living on the streets while trying to maintain some semblance of normalcy. This instability in his life contributed to his erratic behavior, especially in public spaces, where he sometimes became loud or confrontational, drawing attention and concern from those around him. Neely's mental health issues were not new. He had been known to the police and the city's mental health services due to previous incidents where he had been a danger to himself or others. Despite these challenges, there were moments when he seemed capable of great warmth and personality. For some, he was a reminder of the struggles many individuals face in a city that can feel cold and indifferent to those in need. His death would ultimately bring attention to the broader issues of mental health, homelessness, and the systemic failures that so often leave people like Jordan Neely vulnerable. On the afternoon of May 2023, the subway car was packed with commuters making their way through the busy New York City transit system. Among them was Jordan Neely, who had reportedly been acting erratically. Witnesses described him as shouting and making threatening statements, though details of his exact words vary. Neely, according to reports, had been expressing frustration and distress, causing some passengers to feel uneasy. Several witnesses recall him speaking about his struggles, mentioning that he was hungry and tired. His behavior appeared to unsettle many on the train, particularly in such a crowded and confined space. In response to Neely's outburst, Penny, who was also on the subway, decided to step in. Penny, a former Marine, reportedly assessed the situation and perceived Neely as a potential threat to the safety of others around him. Witnesses recalled Penny approaching Neely, engaging in a brief exchange before attempting to restrain him. Penny, using his training, put Neely in a chokehold, a move that is often used in situations where one person is trying to control another. Some bystanders noticed the chokehold and began to react, with a few pleading for Penny to release Neely. As the struggle continued, the tension on the subway escalated. Neely fought back initially, but the situation rapidly deteriorated. The hold lasted for several minutes, during which Neely appeared to lose consciousness. Other passengers began to notice the severity of the situation and shouted at Penny to let go, but it was too late. By the time the train reached its destination, emergency services were called, and Neely was declared dead shortly thereafter. Some witnesses tried to intervene. Others filmed the incident, but there was no immediate action to stop Penny's restraint. The entire event unfolded quickly, leaving little time for anyone to de-escalate the situation before it reached its tragic outcome. After Jordan Neely's death, Penny was charged with criminally negligent homicide, which is defined as causing the death of another person through reckless behavior that a reasonable person would recognize as a substantial risk. The prosecution argued that Penny's actions went beyond self-defense and amounted to excessive force. They claimed that Neely, while acting erratically, did not pose an immediate or deadly threat to Penny or anyone else, and that the chokehold Penny applied was not only dangerous but unnecessary. The prosecution sought to prove that Penny acted recklessly, leading to Neely's death. On the other hand, the defense team framed their case around the idea of self-defense and the reasonable fear Penny felt in the moment. Penny's legal team argued that he was acting out of concern for the safety of himself and others on the subway. According to their narrative, Neely's behavior was unpredictable and threatening, and Penny, trained in the military to react under pressure, made a split-second decision to intervene. They emphasized that Penny did not intend to harm Neely, but rather tried to subdue him temporarily, believing that he was preventing a greater risk to public safety. Throughout the trial, key evidence played a pivotal role in shaping the case. Surveillance footage from the subway car showed the moment when Penny approached Neely and applied the chokehold. This footage, along with witness testimonies, became central to both sides of the argument. Some witnesses described Neely as being aggressive and threatening, reinforcing the defense's claim that Penny was reacting to a potential danger. Others testified that Neely was not violent, instead appearing to be in distress, which bolstered the prosecution's case that Penny overreacted. Witnesses were divided, and their accounts of the incident played a significant role in the trial's outcome. Some passengers on the train described Penny's actions as calm and controlled, while others testified that the chokehold lasted far too long. Medical experts were also brought in to discuss the cause of death, with the prosecution focusing on the excessive force used in the restraint, and the defense arguing that Neely's death was influenced by his underlying health conditions. As the trial progressed, the defense leaned heavily on the idea of split-second decision-making in high-stress situations, drawing on Penny's military training to support his actions. The prosecution, however, argued that there was no justification for such a prolonged chokehold, and that Penny failed to recognize the serious risk of harm his actions posed. The question for the jury became whether Penny's actions were a reasonable response to the threat he believed he faced, or if they crossed the line into criminal negligence. In the end, the jury reached a verdict of not guilty, finding Daniel Penny not criminally negligent in the death of Jordan Neely. The decision came after careful deliberation and a complex evaluation of the evidence presented throughout the trial. One of the key factors that influenced the jury's decision was the question of intent. Penny's defense argued that his actions were not meant to harm Neely, but were instead motivated by a genuine concern for public safety. The jury seemed to believe that Penny acted out of a reasonable fear, given the chaotic and unpredictable situation on the subway. The jury likely also considered the legal standard of criminally negligent homicide, which requires proving that the defendant's actions showed a gross deviation from what a reasonable person would do. In Penny's case, the defense argued that given his military training, he acted in a way that seemed reasonable to him in the heat of the moment, even if others might disagree. The prosecution struggled to convince the jury that Penny's actions amounted to recklessness rather than a defensive reaction. They presented their case by focusing on the duration of the chokehold and the fact that Neely, while acting erratically, did not pose an immediate life-threatening danger. However, the jury may have felt that in the context of the crowded subway, Penny's actions could be seen as an understandable response to a perceived threat, even if they ultimately resulted in tragedy. The emotional and moral elements surrounding the case also weighed heavily on public opinion, but the jury had to focus on the legal aspects. On one side, many felt sympathy for Jordan Neely, whose struggles with mental illness and homelessness had been well documented, leading to anger over his death. For some, the case represented the failure of society to address these issues adequately, and they viewed Penny's actions as an overreach. On the other hand, there were those who sympathized with Penny, believing that he was simply trying to protect others in a dangerous situation. Public reactions were deeply divided, and these emotions likely played a role in shaping how people viewed the case, though the jury's decision had to be based on the legal standards rather than popular opinion. The jury's decision reflected a complex balance between the facts of the case, the legal definitions of reasonable force, and the emotional weight of the tragedy. They had to consider whether Penny's actions, while controversial, crossed the line into criminal negligence, or if he had genuinely acted with the belief that he was protecting others from harm. The case of Daniel Penny and Jordan Neely sparked intense public debate, with reactions varying widely across different groups and communities. Social media quickly became a battleground, with people taking to platforms like Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok to express their opinions, both for and against the verdict. For many, the case highlighted the deep divides in society when it comes to issues of race, public safety, and mental health. Some viewed Penny's actions as a justified response to a potential threat, while others saw it as an example of over-policing or excessive force, particularly in a situation involving someone like Neely, who was struggling with mental illness and homelessness. Protests erupted in various cities, with demonstrators expressing their outrage at the decision and calling for greater accountability in how cases of public intervention are handled. Activists advocating for mental health reform and homelessness rights argued that Neely's death could have been avoided if there had been better resources and support for individuals facing mental health crises. They believed that Penny's actions were a reflection of a system that too often fails to address the needs of vulnerable people, especially those suffering from mental illness. These protests often turned into calls for systemic change, focusing on how society treats people who fall through the cracks of the system. On the other side, many people defended Daniel Penny, arguing that he acted out of genuine concern for the safety of the other passengers. Supporters of Penny's actions stressed that in a tense and unpredictable situation, a trained individual like Penny should not be criticized for making a split-second decision in the face of perceived danger. For them, the verdict was a win for self-defense and public safety, believing that Penny was simply trying to protect others in an unsafe environment. This viewpoint resonated particularly with people who felt that there is a growing concern over safety in public spaces, especially in places like subways, where incidents involving aggression or violence can escalate quickly. The case also raised difficult questions about the broader implications of public safety and self-defense laws. Many were left questioning where the line should be drawn between protecting oneself and using excessive force. Mental health advocates pointed out the urgent need for better mental health services and crisis intervention strategies, arguing that incidents like this could be avoided with proper training and resources to handle individuals in distress. Others highlighted the growing concern over the prevalence of violence and safety in urban spaces, making the question of how to balance safety with compassion even more complex. As the case continued to unfold, the public's response showed how divided the nation is on these issues. For some, the verdict was seen as an affirmation of justice, while for others, it underscored a larger failure to address critical social issues such as mental health care, homelessness, and the way we respond to people in crisis. The case forced society to confront difficult questions about who is responsible for protecting individuals in vulnerable situations and how far people can go to defend themselves before crossing a line. The case of Daniel Penny and Jordan Neely has undoubtedly left a lasting impact on both the public and legal landscapes. Daniel Penny, a former Marine, faced charges of criminally negligent homicide after he restrained Jordan Neely on a subway train, leading to Neely's tragic death. Throughout the trial, the debate centered on whether Penny's actions were a necessary response to a perceived threat, or if they crossed the line into excessive force. The jury's decision to acquit Penny sparked strong reactions on both sides, with some believing justice was served, while others saw the verdict as a failure to address systemic issues like mental health and homelessness. This case raises difficult questions about public safety, self-defense, and how we handle individuals in mental distress. The verdict serves as a reminder of the complexity of such situations and the challenges in balancing protection with compassion. It also highlights the need for greater discussion and action on issues like mental health care and crisis intervention, which continue to affect vulnerable individuals in our communities. As we reflect on the broader implications, we must consider the lessons we can learn from this case. How do we respond when we feel threatened in public? What can be done to better support people like Jordan Neely who face mental health challenges? The debate is far from over, and the outcome of this trial could set a precedent for future cases involving similar situations. If you found this video insightful, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel for more thought-provoking content. Stay tuned, and thanks for watching.